I'm staring into the abyss again. The abyss stares back, with teeth bared and a hunger that hasn't dulled a single bit in the past 30 years.
The sanctity of
this place
has been fouled.
Replaying Diablo after 2+ decades from my last playthrough is a process of rediscovery. It's like revisiting a childhood haunt, the familiar landmarks tinged with nostalgia, yet undeniably different through the lens of time passing. What was the entire world now feels small. Tristram is quaint, its inhabitants are still there at their posts, ready to gossip, give you quests and buy the loot you uncover from the catacombs, no questions asked. Which has always been a weird gaming convention to accept considering the narrative and setting of the game. But let's stick a pin in that one for later. Yet the atmosphere, that's something Diablo holds on to with an iron grip. The oppressive darkness punctuated only by flickering torches and the occasional bolt of arcane energy is as potent as ever. The perpetual night the entire game seems to take place in makes its timeline seem both infinite and momentary. Do all the events in the game happen during a single night? Or are you in a demonically caused time bubble, a Groundhog's Day sort of scenario, and you've been going into the catacombs and dying over and over each time, making it a bit deeper and remembering what you did and how you did it? Let's stick a pin in that one as well. The ambient music, an iconic one by this point, punctuated by the unsettling sounds of the undead, still sends a shiver down my spine and honestly does most of the heavy lifting in terms of atmosphere building. It complements and then elevates the visuals and action happening on screen. The gameplay, however, is where the true rediscovery lies. Compared to its modern brethren, Diablo feels downright brutal. Gone are the days of several rows of potions on your belt or being able to hotkey up to 12 skills. Here, every potion is a precious resource, carefully rationed and used only when absolutely necessary. Mana management is equally demanding. Spamming spells is a luxury you can't afford because there is no passive mana regen. Every cast needs to be deliberate, a tactical decision with potentially dire consequences. This frugality forces a slower, more methodical approach to your combat. You can't just wade in, hack and slash your way through hordes of demons like you would in the latter games. You need to plan, pick your targets carefully, and utilize the dark and cramped environment to your advantage. This deliberate pace, some might call it slow, is strangely refreshing, and I see it as part of the atmosphere. It forces you to appreciate the weight of each encounter, the risk versus reward of every decision. A single misstep against a pack of fallen ones could spell doom in the early stages. Hell, exploding dungeon battles can kill you during the first parts of the game, and getting your attack animations interrupted by damage will surely get you killed more than once. That much is a guarantee. This isn't a power fantasy, or at the very least it doesn't start like one.
Fresh meat.
You're courageous enough to delve into the cathedral's catacombs, sure, but you're no hero. Not yet. Things are still extremely dangerous. You're part of a struggle for survival against overwhelming odds. The tension is palpable and punctuated by your characters' lines as they descend deeper and deeper into the dungeon.
Rest well, Leoric. I'll find your son. I must be getting close.
Making every successful kill, every precious piece of loot, all the more satisfying. The character progression system is another stark reminder of how much things have changed in the intervening years. Each of the classes has only one skill of fairly arguable utility. You do your customization via stats and mostly items, because each class has different stat limits depending on which ones are most relevant to them. Warriors will have a low-capped magic stat, while sorcerers low-capped strength stat. But one of the greatest, coolest, most old-school things that Diablo does is that it makes the magic spells available to all classes. As long as your character has the required amount of magic stat to learn or cast a spell, they can do so. Of course, warriors and rogues, having lower caps on their magic, can never learn all the spells in the game, nor can they ever cast them at the same power that a sorcerer can. But giving all the characters access to the same magic spell pool makes for some better immersion into this world than giving each class their own specific mana-consuming spells or abilities. It makes magic feel like this one sort of force or energy that anyone can tap into to various degrees depending on their capabilities. And that, in my mind at least, makes it a more realistic and immersive world than what the sequel would bring. Maybe I would prefer to play a long sword-wielding fighter type who can also throw a healing spell or some similar form of cantrip if need be, or a spellcaster type who can also wield a short sword when things get extra dicey. I mean, you should be able to do everything that Gandalf does, and that guy dual wields a staff and a longsword. Sure, neither of those builds I outlined are optimal and will make your playthrough more challenging, but you can do it. Rediscovering Diablo now is a further reminder that sometimes less is truly more. With its limited resources and unforgiving difficulty, Diablo offers a challenge that's both exhilarating and humbling. It reminds you that victory isn't a given, it's something hard-earned and deeply cherished.
Your madness ends here, betrayer.
One other important aspect I had to relearn about Diablo is how it throws a fair number of unfair stuff at you. You can find corrupted or cursed items, things that decrease your abilities instead of enhancing them, and this is a very old-school D&D feature which has basically been erased from most RPGs since. They can still appear here and there, of course, but in modern RPGs, cursed items generally show up as specific quest or storyline items. And when it comes to unique items, and especially quest items, Diablo is yet again wonderfully surprising because these super special items both look and feel super special. They have separate graphics assets made for them, and likewise, the benefits they feature are clearly above everything else you tend to find around the levels you gain them at. Of course, this was only possible because of the small scope of the game itself, but that doesn't take away from how much this lends to the weight of importance of these items that you have quested for in the literal bowels of hell. The cathedral's catacombs further hide a large number of magical shrines which can impart either net blessings upon you or do a give and take. For instance, subtracting a point from one random stat and assigning it to another and such. And honestly, that makes sense, because this entire place is being actively corrupted by one of the prime evils. The stuff inside is bound to want to harm you, right? I would have expected a much larger amount of them to do you harm, to be honest, but I guess the monsters fill that role splendidly. And at the same time, it makes me ponder the what ifs, or how different the sequel could have been if things were taken into a different direction. Going back to the first thing I pinned, about the locals being more than happy to buy the looted gear that comes from what they will tell you is a cursed place, always felt weird from a world-building standpoint. At the very least, I imagine these items would have had to either be cleansed through some form of religious or magical ritual or melted down where possible, so that there would be no chance of Diablo's corruption to linger on. Going a bit deeper with the world-building intellectual exercise, there's a bunch of other questions and theories that arise. The world portrayed in Diablo is a rare combination of familiar, dark, and mysterious. This was before it had a name, lore, or history, but have demons been a part of this world since the very beginning? The lore present in the game talks about hell, heaven, and the prime evils being banished, but everyone in Tristram seems to be much too blasé about their demonic troubles. My point being, in a world where demons have never been a thing, and this is the first time the undead rise from the grave, this would be an event of 13 out of 7 on the pants-shitting scale. Anyone with any semblance of sense who could run would have ran at the first sight of little Timmy, who died of influenza last week, reanimating and asking where his mommy is.
Are you my mommy?
As a corollary to this, most of the threats in the game can be explained by the corruption that follows Diablo's presence. Zombies, skeletons, shades, hordes, etc. But not all of the threats are demonic in nature. How did humanity manage to not only survive but also develop well into the medieval era alongside what appear to be large populations of winged fiends and fallen ones? If these two wildly random and alive creatures exist, what other weird creatures exist out there waiting in the dark, dense foliage of the thick forest situated at the outskirts of Tristram? There is obviously an entire realm out there because merchants exist, the town has an inn, some Easter kingdoms are mentioned. Both Deckard Cain and Adria had to come from somewhere else other than Tristram. And don't even get me started on how full of shit I think Deckard Cain is, but I digress.
Cain isn't what he says he is. Sure, he talks a good story. Some of them are real scary or funny. But I think he knows more than he knows he knows.
Tristram, which seems to be nothing more than a hamlet as far as we can explore, is somehow important enough for King Leoric to enact his revenge upon, both in life as well as in on death.
The warmth of life has entered my tomb. Prepare yourself, mortal, to serve my master for eternity.
One has to assume he wasn't just the king of Tristram. There would be a much larger realm out there to rule for a king such as Leoric. So there's this much larger world out there that is strangely blocked off. Which takes me neatly to the second pin from the beginning of the video, my time bubble spell theory. It is true that various events happen throughout the game that imply some amount of time is passing and not repeating itself. Things like Ogden's sign being stolen and the water being tainted. But those could just be part of the internal mechanics of the time bubble spell. It encompasses a chunk of space-time, with everything that happened within it, in the order they happened within it. But there are some weird discrepancies here. First of all, not all the events that can happen. Sometimes there's a dying man in front of the cathedral, sometimes there's not. Sometimes Ogden asks for his sign, sometimes he doesn't. Is this by design or an unexpected consequence of the time bubble spell? The other piece of evidence I can add to this theory is what I interpret to be a weird artifact or paradox of the spell. Because you see, space-time doesn't particularly like to be messed with, so you won't see any tree moving in the wind, nor the river water flowing. Everything is still in Tristram, except for the living and the undead. Not even the light moves. It projects in these very clear and fixed shapes, but doesn't flicker. Only in dungeons does fire actually move. Also, isn't it odd you can't cast spells in town? Huh. Eerie, isn't it? As if someone or something has managed to imperfectly encapsulate a portion of space-time within an invisible and impassable barrier. In a world of instant gratification and streamlined experiences, Diablo stands as a testament to a bygone era. It's a game that doesn't cater to the faint of heart. It demands your patience, your focus, and your strategic thinking. For those willing to invest the time, the rewards are immense. It's a journey into the darkest depths of a world that was still to be named during its longest of long nights. A test of both skill and willpower. And as you stand triumphant over a vanquished Diablo, a single thought echoes in your mind. Sometimes, the greatest discoveries are the ones we make within ourselves and then shove into our foreheads. If you enjoyed this video, you may want to check out the one on screen right now. I've been Steven Ansons, thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.